Delivering for You. That was the title of the Government of Saskatchewan's budget that was announced yesterday. In the middle of unpredictable economic times, the province released a balanced budget. It's the first one since the provincial election in October. The Finance Minister, Jim Ryder, is projecting a surplus, but it's a small one. Revenues totaled around $21 billion. That's up about $1 billion from last year. Expenses also up about $900 million. Also to $21 billion total. It leaves a razor-thin surplus, just over $12 million. It's a lot to digest in the budget, so we are going to break it down. Who's getting more funding? Is anyone getting less? How are people you elected spending your tax dollars? We'll also hear from some of the major players in education and healthcare for reaction. We also want your thoughts. What do you think about this budget? Are you happy about it? Are you mad about it? Let us know. 1-800-716-2221 or email us bluesky@cbc.ca. So this year's budget, one of the criticisms is that it doesn't factor in any fallout from the threat of President Donald Trump's tariffs. So to help us understand how the province is budgeting in a time of economic certainty, Finance Minister Jim Ryder spoke with the Morning Edition's Adam Hunter this morning.
The tariffs are on, they're off, the percentage changes. We don't know what impact it's going to have. We don't know how long they're going to be on. We've been very transparent in that if the tariffs are on for an extended period of time, it will push us into a deficit position. There's no doubt about that. But we're optimistic that cooler heads will prevail and if that they'll be on for a short period of time. We thought the best way to deal with these tariffs is to be in a strong fiscal position, and that's what this budget delivers. It's probably, I'm assuming, going to be the only balanced budget from the provinces in the country this year.
How much of this budget is decided, last fall when the election campaign and those election promises are made?
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of it. This budget delivers on the rest of our election platform. We made the promises, we're going to keep them. And I think it's very reflective of what we heard from people on the campaign trail. And since then, talking to people, they said the onus needs to be on affordability, needs to be on education, healthcare, and safety. And that's what this budget focuses on.
What are your immediate concerns about the tariffs?
We just need cooler heads to prevail and common sense. The Premier said many times the U.S. is our biggest trading partner. And when this is over, they're still going to be our biggest trading partner. But I would say this speaks to what our government has been working on for a period of years. We were criticized by the opposition for trade missions. We were criticized for opening international trade offices. And now that we see what happens when you're beholden to one customer, suddenly the opposition is saying, well, we need more markets around the world. Well, obviously we do. And that's what we've been working on. We're going to continue to focus on.
When it comes to the debt, and you mentioned not borrowing now for a contingency fund, because of course that would add to your debt load. There's been some criticism about the debt increasing. What can you say to that?
Well, so that debt that's increasing isn't for operations. That debt is for capital. So what you're seeing that debt increase for, which, by the way, the backdrop to this, Adam, is our population keeps increasing. Statistics Canada announced just yesterday that our population hit 1.25 million for the first time ever. So all these residents, this is great news. I mean, the province is growing, so we all need services. So on the Crown side, Sask Power is adding infrastructure, Sask Energy is, SaskTel is. And then on the government side, the line government side, the ministries and agencies, you see more that capital money for the debt is going towards hospitals and urgent care centers and schools and long-term care facilities and all the education and healthcare and highways that we need. So I would equate that more to people have mortgage debt because they need a place to live, so they have the debt on that side, but it's not credit card debt.
Are you expecting to have to spend in year on healthcare and education like we've seen the last couple of years to support classrooms? There's been money spent outside of the budget that wasn't expected on education, and same with healthcare.
It could happen. Obviously, we're making healthcare and education a priority, and we're not going to shortchange it. It can happen, for example, when there's growth in student population beyond what's anticipated. We've always funded that. So, it could happen, but a budget's a snapshot in time. It's your best estimate at the time. Expenses could increase, but you can also have revenues increase, and that happened to us last year, for example. Because of the strength of the economy, corporate income tax was higher than anticipated. There was a deficit anticipated, and actually at the end of the day, we had a surplus. So, it can happen both on the revenue and expenditure side.
What's something in the budget that's not getting a lot of attention that you think deserves it?
I think the income tax cuts, affordability was front and center during the election campaign. People clearly said that was a concern of theirs. There's no better way to help folks with affordability than just letting them keep more of their own money in their pockets. And those income tax cuts are going to affect everybody in the province in a positive way. That's really, really important.
If the country and the province are impacted by tariffs from China and the U.S., are you expecting the next federal government to step up with support for workers affected and folks affected by that?
You know what? If it's on for any length of time, we will definitely be having discussions with the federal government. They have to step up. You mentioned, Adam, about the Chinese tariffs. So the U.S. tariffs have gotten all the attention. But those Chinese tariffs on canola are going to have a big impact on Saskatchewan potentially. They've come about because of tariffs that the federal government put on EV vehicles from China, and they've been very quiet about it. The premier has been advocating strongly for that. We need the federal government to do something. They cause that counter tariff. It's going to have a big impact on our province, and they need to grab the bull by the horns and deal with that.
That is Saskatchewan's Minister of Finance, Jim Ryder. He was speaking with Adam Hunter this morning on the Morning Edition. Once kind of the dust had settled, Budget Day is a very busy day over at the Saskatchewan Legislature. A lot of people asking a lot of questions. Chaos, to put it lightly. So having some time to have a real conversation with him after the fact is really nice. Now, we know the Saskatchewan's Teachers Federation has been going head-to-head with the province over class complexity for a while now. Education was said to be a priority topic for the provincial budget, but this year's education budget isn't that much different from last year. It's up 0.3%. Education Minister Everett Hindley did speak with our Alexander Kwan in the Rotunda yesterday.
What we want to do is be able to help support teachers with the expertise they have in K-3 literacy and really providing them with any additional resources, tools. Perhaps it's a screening for kids at that age. But again, working and collaborating with teachers, with those in our classroom to say, what can we do to make sure that we're giving our kids in that K-3 level every opportunity to succeed? Because all of the data, everything points towards if a child is reading at grade level by the time they're exiting grade 3, they really are set up for success for the rest of their academic years, whether it's junior high, post-secondary education, you name it. So that is going to be a very strong and significant focus for us to make sure we're supporting literacy in our schools.
We've talked to a few people already today. They've mentioned wanting to hear more about the $10 daycare expansion. Yeah. Can you give us an update on what the status is right now? Sure.
So we continue to be in contact with the federal government. I had a conversation with the former federal minister, a couple of weeks ago, and at the officials level, chatting with the federal government to see what we can do to address some of the concerns that are out there, because we do have a year to go in this agreement. It expires March of 26, not March of 25, and I think it would be prudent for us to make sure that some of the concerns that we are hearing, whether it's from families, from parents, and from childcare operators. I've had the opportunity to meet with SECA, the Saskatchewan Early Childhood Association. They've been advocating on behalf of their members as well to see what we can do to make this program better, to address some of the concerns that are being raised, to make sure that it's sustainable, that it is affordable, and that we're able to expand this program across this province. So we continue to negotiate with our federal government, and we are open to signing a deal.
You mentioned some concerns. What are those concerns that you've heard?
Well, I think some of the concerns are around just the sustainability of the program. There are concerns around, for example, kids that age out kind of midway through, things like of that nature. Other concerns I think that have been identified with us that we, as we're consulting and talking to perhaps other provinces and territories, seeing what we can do. But again, every province is a little bit different. Again, we were one of the first provinces to sign on to this agreement to move quickly to expand the number of childcare spaces across Saskatchewan. But we know we need to do so in a sustainable fashion. So those are the things I think it would be it's incumbent upon us as government to make sure that we are hearing the concerns that we are hearing from those that are in the sector, but then trying to act upon them to see if there's a way that perhaps we can work with the federal government to make it better for everyone.
Final question from me. There was also some money in this budget for the portable classrooms.
Yeah.
How is it going addressing classroom sizes? What does the work look like?
For sure. So, a couple of things as we've talked about previously. There's the investment into new capital projects, brand new schools in parts of communities where they really need them. Secondly, that takes some time. So wherever we can, and we've done that, on a few occasions, put some additional dollars towards relocatable classrooms because it's easier and quicker to be able to get those operational sooner for school divisions. So that is an important component of what we need to try to do in the education system and through the entire sector to make sure that we are providing some relief when it comes to some of these classroom pressures. So that's a significant component of this budget as well.
That was Everett Hindley, the Minister of Education, speaking with our Alexander Kwan in the Rotunda yesterday after the budget was delivered. The education budget of the bigger budget includes $2.4 billion in operating funds for K-12 schools. It's an increase of 8%. Some money will go toward the teachers' new collective agreement. That includes salary increases and dealing with class complexity. There's also more money for transportation, building maintenance, new schools, and specialized support classrooms. Joining us today for reaction on the provincial budget is the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation President, Samantha Beacott. Welcome to Blue Sky.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
It's always weird for me when I'm interviewing the back and forth of the Sam. It's fine. I'm sure you feel the same way. Looking at the budget as a whole, how are you feeling about it? I saw some of the reaction last night on social media, and I noted that it was more positive than reaction we've seen in the past from the STF.
Yeah, the last 2 years have definitely been a challenge in terms of my role with or my working with the government. We've seen it over the last number of years, though, the last decade really, where education funding hasn't kept pace with enrollment growth or inflation, and we had seen a decade of cuts. But the last 2 years, we have seen a bit of catch up on those dollars. We still have work to do, but it is encouraging that we see that change of tone and a change of direction. You did note that some of the criticism around education was looking at the entire education budget, but when we're focusing in just on that pre-K to 12 education, we do see a bit of hope within that we're going to start to see a better experience for our students. We did have questions about that, obviously. Budget day is always chaos, and kind of trying to weed through the numbers and make sure things are aligning is always a challenge, but luckily, I was able to have a follow-up conversation with the Deputy Minister this morning, and he was able to provide us with a confirmation that the increases over the last couple of years with our collective bargaining agreement have already been built into past budgets. They're not included within the $186 million. There is additional funds to address next year's increases from the provincial collective bargaining agreement, but there was already some planning done before this year to ensure that the contract will be fully funded, which is something that we heard on the floor of the legislature yesterday as well.
I'm wondering if you could pull back the curtain for us, Samantha. Do you get to see the budget before it's delivered, or do you find out the details with everyone else?
So we have a conversation, it's very high level to get pieces of the information, but we're not seeing big details. So a lot of our analysis happens after the fact when everyone else receives those details. So we did hear the announcement of 186 million. We were able to do some preliminary kind of calculations, but again, getting into those details and really understanding what is the true impact going to be for students is something that is important to us, and making sure that it is a real increase that's felt. That I know in previous years we've seen that as well within education, where they budget one amount and then all of a sudden there's additional amounts throughout the year. So comparing that actual spend to what is budgeted for the next year is important. And this still is an increase when we take into consideration those extra amounts that came last year. There were fewer that we experienced though.
When you see those numbers then, because you're not getting an advanced look at what's coming, what was the feeling you had in the pit of your stomach this year? Like, how would you describe how you felt about it compared to previous years?
Well, again, like I said, our initial calculations, we were able to factor in a bit of an estimate in terms of the student growth within Saskatchewan, factoring in a perceived inflation growth. When we still did, even with those considered, we did see an improvement to per student funding. We've always said that we're not going to be able to repair the 10 years of damage that we've seen in education within a year or two. So again, we're continuing on the right path. Moving forward, we need to see government continue on this path. We're not done. We're not really even close to done. We're still about $1,800 behind per student. So kids today in grade 12 are receiving just a little under $2,000 less in supports than they would have received when they were in, say, kindergarten to grade 2. So we definitely still have lots of work to do to make sure that those K-3 are receiving more supports as they move through their education. And it was nice to hear the minister talk about the priority that they're putting on K-3 literacy. We have some questions about whether $2 million is going to be enough to fully support all of those students. So there's still some questions and concerns that we have. But like I said, this is a step in the right direction from what we have experienced in the past. And having that commitment to fully fund our collective agreement is important. It shouldn't be something that's a question, though, but it's good to see that they're making those commitments.
I know just from friends of mine and how education works that it's not just about teachers and students. There are all of those extra supports that go into it. I know that the government is funding more education and trying to bring speech language pathologist training into Saskatchewan, where historically you've had to leave the province to get that education. But because school boards determine where the money needs to go, and you have classrooms that are overflowing, the money typically goes to teachers and to those positions. How do you see the balance between people supporting students in terms of teachers, occupational therapists, speech language pathologists, education assistants into these increases? Because if the school boards are determining that, the kids still might not be getting the supports that they need just by nature of needing another classroom.
Absolutely. All of those resources are so necessary. We've talked about the cuts that have occurred to education and the decreases that we've seen in relation to those other supports when we're talking about speech language pathologists, mental health counselors, educational psychologists, all of those. Actually, the only increase that we have actually experienced in education is in relation to educational assistants. And when we're talking about complexity in classrooms, educational assistants provide a critical support, but even there, they're not following the pace that we would need to see those numbers increase, because complexity is just getting out of hand in terms of classrooms and what we can do within classrooms as classrooms grow and we have a more diverse population. So we do need to start to look at how we can support everyone with their individual needs, not just with teachers, because absolutely teachers can't do it all. Divisions need to have adequate funding so that they can ensure all of those supports are available. One positive that did come through the budget that doesn't just take into account teachers is the additional support classrooms. Those classrooms are budgeted to have one teacher within the class, but also two educational assistants to be able to support the complexities within that classroom. So some of those things have been included. We've seen that, but again, they in terms of the rest of the budget, it's unrestricted. So we're depending on school boards and school divisions to make the right decision in terms of how are they allocating those funds and ensuring students' needs are being met in each of the different school divisions across the province.
Are you left with any questions after the budget, really obvious ones that involve how or why?
Yeah, always questions. I don't know if I would say that they're obvious ones, but again, like I said, that K-3 literacy is $2 million enough. How far is that going to go when we're splitting it across 27 different school divisions? In the clip that you had played earlier, the minister had pointed out that this is a strong, significant portion of the budget. I would argue that maybe $2 million isn't really strong or significant when we're talking about a budget that's over $2.4 billion. I agree. K-3 literacy is critical to ensuring students are successful through their pre-K to 12 education. I worry that that's not enough. And again, as you pointed out, the increases that came through this year's budget are largely due to the provincial collective bargaining process that teachers have gone through. We can't just assume that we're done. We need parents and others involved in education to continue that advocacy to ensure that school divisions are getting sufficient resources to meet the needs of all of their students. So as I said, this is a first step. It's definitely not a solution to all of the problems that we're experiencing in education. But after 10 years of challenges and cuts, it is positive to start to see that shift in direction.
I wanted to touch on something before I let you go. The minister mentioned relocatable classrooms. And I think for people who came up through portables, explain to people what that actually means. And is it a good thing?
Questionable. I mean, relocatable classrooms gets the space to schools quickly where maybe you just need a little bit extra space so that you don't have to use a library for a classroom or maybe a staff room for a classroom. And then it saves a little bit of expense in terms of creating a new school. Portables aren't going to be the solution, though. So like I said, it gives that immediate relief or a little bit quicker relief in comparison to the timeline of building an entirely new school. But we need to have better planning in this province in terms of the infrastructure that is in place. So that's kind of twofold. I know we've criticized the government a little bit in the past in terms of that capital investment and them celebrating that all the time. But if we're going to celebrate growth in Saskatchewan and we're going to then we need to plan for the growth in Saskatchewan, which means not only having a place for students to learn, but having the professionals in place to be able to support students in their learning as well.
We are talking about the provincial budget today, reaction, who's getting more money, who's getting less. And that razor-thin surplus of just over $12 million. My guest right now is Samantha Beacott. She is the president of the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation. I know, while I have you here, I wanted to talk to you about the next round of negotiations, because while everything with classroom complexity and the teachers' agreement is sort of wrapped up. I mean, the class complexity thing is still going, but the contract stuff is figured out. But that's going to be over again right away. When do you start talking to the government about the next round of negotiations so that you're not in the same position you were, say, early last year?
That's a great question. So yeah, absolutely. Our contract isn't fully wrapped up. Class complexity will be put into the contract as an article. We need to determine what that actual contract language looks like. As you said, the arbitrator gave us 60 days to finalize that language or come to a mutual agreement. And we're hopeful we can get that done sooner rather than later. Looking ahead into the future, again, like I said, this was a first step where we are absolutely going to be looking at how we can continue to provide protections through that collective agreement process to ensure that students and teachers have better experiences in classrooms across Saskatchewan. This agreement will expire on August 31st, 2026, and we always start negotiations about 100 days prior to the expiry of that agreement. So right around the end of May. And it's interesting that you pointed out we want to not have the lengthy experience that we had with this round of bargaining. We actually started negotiations in this round of bargaining earlier and got that process going. And we went through the summer, which isn't really typical to our process because we wanted to try and get this done as soon as possible. Fortunately, it went out over a 2-year period almost, and we're hoping that the next round looks a little bit different and there's a little bit better relationship when we get back to the table to ensure that it's a smoother process and we get supports in classrooms sooner rather than later.
Well, it certainly is a big topic and it affects a lot of people. So Samantha, thanks for your time, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Sam.
You're welcome. Samantha Beacott, the president of the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation, reacting to the provincial budget delivered yesterday. The other really big topic when it comes to money in Saskatchewan is healthcare. The Ministry of Health will see its budget go up by about $485 million. The finance minister says that money will be used to decrease surgical wait times and increase access to primary health providers. $156 million of those dollars will go toward recruitment and training for healthcare professionals. Jeremy Cockrell is the Minister of Health.
Two priorities of our government as it stands right now. Number one, making sure that we're making the right investments into primary care to make sure that everyone in this province, whether they live in Regina or whether they live in a small rural community, have access to the right primary care practitioners. And you're seeing us make investments in that in terms of adding residency seats for doctors all over the province in different specialties, but most importantly, family medicine. You're seeing us add more funding for more nurse practitioner positions because, again, primary care doesn't necessarily mean just a doctor or just a nurse practitioner. We really think there's a whole spectrum of options in terms of how people can connect to a primary care practitioner. That's one. The additional investment that we're making into our surgical performance, really, around the province. We have a very ambitious goal of achieving 450,000 surgeries over the next 4 years. That's going to mean we have to do more surgeries in Regina. We have to do more surgeries in our regional centers, more surgeries in Saskatoon. And, we actually have our provincial head of surgery here today. And, I've been working closely with Dr. Kelly to make sure that we can find opportunities to get the most out of our regional sites, but then where we have opportunities to recruit the right people to our province and then add different initiatives like the robotic surgeries that we have at RUH and St. Paul's and pretty soon here at Pasqua. That's how we're going to reach that ambitious goal and make sure that Saskatchewan people at the end of the day have a reasonable wait time for surgeries.
When it comes to concerns we've heard so far today, just one of the big ones was retention, that there's recruitment efforts, there's more seats added, but that current healthcare workers, they're wanting to leave the profession or they're maybe being burnt out, they're having to work too much. What's your message to the healthcare workers who are concerned about the government's retention strategy?
Yeah, you know what, I would say we hear you. We hear that, it's a challenging work environment. I've been able myself to tour almost all the hospitals in Saskatoon, Regina, and our healthcare workers in all those hospitals are working extremely hard, again, really in the name of providing your family, my family, all the families in Saskatchewan the best possible care. So we hear those concerns. That's why we're making these investments that we are into City Hospital, for example, in Saskatoon, to ensure that we can have better patient flow in that hospital. It's, I said to somebody earlier today, adding 109 acute beds at City Hospital, that's like adding another hospital in Saskatoon. That's a major investment. I think about the other investments we're making into Prince Albert Victoria Hospital. This is all about expanding capacity so that we can ease patient flow. And, again, it comes back to, I also think about the urgent care center in Regina, making sure that patients are accessing the right level of care at the right time. We've seen nearly 30,000 patients since the urgent care center opened here in Regina. It's that kind of example that ensures that our healthcare workers are seeing the right patients at the right time and that patients at the end of the day have an appropriate wait time for the care that they need.
Saskatchewan's Minister of Health, Jeremy Cockrell, speaking with CBC's Adam Hunter in the Rotunda yesterday after the budget was delivered. And we want to hear from you, too. Does this budget work for you? 1-800-716-2221 or send us an email, bluesky@cbc.ca. There were a number of initiatives in that budget, tax deductions. There were also increases to child support benefits. We want to hear from you. Does it work for you? Have you even looked at the budget yet? 1-800-716-2221 or email bluesky@cbc.ca. Our next guest joins us, is the president of QP 5430, the largest healthcare union in our province. That's Bashir Jello. Bashir, welcome to Blue Sky.
Thank you for having me.
Sorry, I'm choking on my own breath in this moment. Bashir, as you looked at the budget, healthcare's top of the news, top of mind, top of family discussions right now. If you've had to go to a doctor lately, you have feelings one way or another about our healthcare system. How are you feeling after hearing the provincial budget yesterday?
Thank you so much for the questions. I think what we heard, we listened to to the minister, and after the elections, just want to go back to after the election. Some of us healthcare workers, we were a little bit optimistic after the elections because we listened to the premier late speech with the commitment to increase to try to fix the healthcare system. But when we look at this budget, the budget that was released yesterday, yes, we do acknowledge certain improvement in specific areas, for example, the laboratory medicine, the breast health, and then the healthcare. But if you look at the overall budget, to be honest with you, I got to be very frank with you, it's a disappointment. Because if you look at the government budget for last year, for 2024 to 2025, they spent 8.02 billion, and this year they are planning to spend 8.004 billion. That is about over 17 million less than what they spent last year. And we heard the premier, they talk about, we all celebrate the growth in our province, the 1.25 million population in the province. But the budget itself is a disappointment, quite frankly, because there is nothing in this budget that talks about retention of healthcare workers. And the biggest problem we have in the province today with healthcare, we don't have problems with infrastructure buildings. We have a lot of buildings in the province. Now we heard about the premier talking about the Minister of Health talk about the infrastructural development, the Prince Albert, the Weyburn, the Grenfell, but those are all recycled information. We've heard this in the last 2 or 3 budgets, the previous last 2 budgets. Grenfell was going to be built, Weyburn, the Regina. And then when we even look at the urgent care center in Regina, it is a great addition to the community. It was supposed to be operating 24 hours, but that is not the case. The biggest problem we have in our healthcare system today is staffing. We do not have staff to operate these places. You can build all these big hospitals, but if you don't have people to operate these places, it makes no sense. And for you to have staffing, what we need to do is there's going to be a focus on retention. You have to, the current staff you have to keep the current staff you have before you start thinking about recruiting more staff. We see now the trend in people leaving this province. Before it used to go to Alberta. Now we see people, highly trained technologists going to Manitoba. For example, there was something in the budget yesterday about the breast health in Regina. We have heard about this. They used to have 4 trained technologists at the Pasqua Hospital for breast screening. 2 left to Alberta. Why? Because of wages. Healthcare wages in this province have not gone up for 3 years. 3 years. We've been without collective agreement for over 2 years. The wages are not going up. And if you want to be able to fix the healthcare system, the first thing you need to do is to work on retention. Keep the healthcare workers we have here first. The urgent care center is not operating 24 hours. It's only open till 9. Why? Because we do not have staff. We heard about the overcapacity in Regina recently. Why is that happening? It was heartbreaking. If you enter into these hospitals, you see the hallways, how people are there. Why? Because we do not have staffing. We can build all these urgent care centers. We can build all the facilities, but if we don't have staff, it's an empty building you're walking into. So there has to be a focus on retention, and that focus has to be, what are we going to do to keep our staff here? We need to increase the wages of the healthcare workers. And this budget, quite frankly, is a disappointment because I did not see anything in this budget that talks about retention. The only thing we heard about was retain doctors. Yes, we have great doctors in our province, but healthcare is not all doctors. For the doctors to be able to look at you and assess you, they need someone to do your tests before it gets to the doctor. But we tend to forget about that. We are not paying attention to those other health providers. We have our CCAs who work in a long time care, day in and day out. They are overstaffed. They are not being looked after. It's all over the place. And now we talk about overcapacity in Regina. Go to the rural communities. I'll go around all these places. We are for the most part, they are either on bypass or reduced services. We know Broadview. You go to Oxbow, you go to Radville, you go to Redverse, you go to Shalbrook, you go to Hartford. All these places are always on bypass because we do not have staffing. If we are serious about fixing our healthcare system, we have to focus on retention of healthcare workers. And we did not fix this budget.
I know you're the president of the union, but what is your training professionally? What do you work as a healthcare worker?
I am a nuclear medicine technologist at the Pasco Hospital, and I worked there for 17 years.
How did you see this affect your job?
It's not, because right now we have staffing in the province. It is going to directly impact our staff. I'll give you an example. Now we talk about an increase in capacity, talk about increase in surgery, 450,000 surgery in the next 4 years, 2025, 95,000. The last time we talked about increase in surgery, there was a significant demand in our department, because what happened is the government announced this ambitious plan to increase surgery without any plan to increase capacity after surgery. Because before you go to surgery, you have to have a series of tests for them to determine that you have a surgery. And then after surgery, there is a post-care. The last time the government announced, we had people do surgeries and then they come back, there's an infection. And this test was in our department. We do a lot of what a test we call white blood cell scan for infection. We were overwhelmed with that, instead of looking after cancer, test for cancer and see how it's progressing. So this increase without any plan of the pre and post is going to be a problem. You can do all the surgery you want, but if you don't have capacity, if you don't do anything about the capacity in the other areas, it is just going to create chaos in the system.
You are the president of the biggest healthcare union in the province. Can you tell me who you're representing, just for clarity? Because there's SUN that deals with registered nurses, but who are you representing as a union, just for clarification?
We represent over 14,000 members in 5 major classifications. Nursing care, we have LPN and CCAs. We represent those in technology, all the tech, like for example, laboratory technologies, MRI, and medical radiation technologies. We represent people in the clerical, we represent people in the environmental service. We represent people who look after our buildings, our trades. So we represent a whole lot of classification in the healthcare system. And without us, we are the backbone of this healthcare system.
What are you hearing from your members after this budget? I can tell you're disappointed, but what are some of the conversations you had with people even last night about this?
We heard so much from our member, the disappointment about there's nothing in this budget to address the root cause, which is retention. We have been bargaining our collective agreement for over 2 years. We have been without we have not had any increase for the past 3 years. So people are disappointed that if there's nothing about retention, what is going to happen with our current bargaining that we are in with SEHO? Is it going to be dragged out by them like they have been doing? Because sometimes we go to bargain, SEHO comes unprepared to bargain with us. They're going to drag, using this to drag it out to the next budget? We don't know. That is a real fear that people have. And also the workload, the work condition is just like, it's unfortunate. I really invite some of you folks to come to this long-term care facility, this hospital, this rural community to see what is happening, what our members are doing. They are working day in and day out. Some can't even get vacation. Some can't even get they go home, they are being called to come back because we do not have staffing, and there is nothing we see in terms of what we're going to do to retain people in this province. And that's a disappointment.
I wanted to ask you about 2 things that come up a lot in society and that get asked for a lot that aren't always supported in a way that make people happy, and that is the overdose crisis and mental health. The government announcing that they're adding these 500 addiction spaces. How does that affect healthcare workers that you represent?
We welcome those things because that is one of the areas that has been overlooked for many years. We need to have a lot of these places, not only in Regina and Saskatchewan. We need to have them in the communities, but above all, we need to have staff to staff these places. If we have these places, we announce all this budget, we just build building, and in Regina and Saskatchewan, without thinking about the rural communities, it's going to be the same thing.
How do you think that recruitment should work? Not just retention, but recruitment. I know a lot of people that don't have a family doctor that might be seeing a nurse practitioner or who have gone to, say, urgent care and given up and gone home. There's a lot of gaps. So how do you think that recruitment and retention should work? Is it just a money issue?
It's not. I think it's the lack of proper planning. Because the fact is, the Sask Party, our government and our employer, SHA, has been very reactionary to some of these crises. Yes, there is a problem, staffing problem here. There's a staffing problem here. The only thing, the process they've had in the past, the strategy they have in the past is not working. What all they want to do, let's contract it out. Or let's bring in nursing staffing agencies so they can do this. We have talked to them. We have given them a 3-point plan. What is the short, medium, and long-term goal to resolve this? It has worked before. For example, we talk about representative workforce in the north, in Prince Albert. They went to the communities, recruited people from high school, put them into this training. Those people are still there. We told them this is something that you can do rather than just relying on importing people into our province. And when you look at this contracting out and then this staffing issue, these are expensive ventures. Sending people from Regina, we are not creating capacity in our own province. If you look at this surgery budget they are talking about, most of the time we are sending people to Alberta to do surgery. We are sending people to Alberta to do breast imaging. We are bringing in contract workers. And if the government can afford to take residents from Regina to Alberta to Calgary for surgery, which is 2 or 3 times the cost. If they can send people for breast imaging 2 or 3 times the cost, they can afford to bring in contract workers and pay them 2 or 3 times. The government can afford to invest in healthcare workers who are going to stay in this province. We need a strategy, not reaction, or something that is just reaction. Oh, this facility doesn't have staff. Let's bring in contract. No, we need to have a plan. Go to our high school, look at potential students, recruit them to stay in the communities, work with healthcare unions to do that. But that is not what we see currently.
What's the next step for you, Bashir?
Well, we are still in bargaining, and we will continue to bargain with SEHO. It has been very disappointing because of the pace at which it's going. We're going to look at our strategy in the next round of bargaining to see and then we'll talk to our members to hear what we're going to do, what our members are going to do, because we cannot afford to be without a collective agreement for over 3 years and not to have, because of the cost of living situation, not to have an increase for 3 or more years. We cannot afford to do that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your perspective and your experience with us today. I wish you luck through bargaining, whatever that looks like.
Thank you.
All right. Bashir Jallow is the president of CUPE 5430, the biggest healthcare union in the province. There's a lot of reaction to tell you about in this budget. It means different things to different people. We've talked about education. We've talked about healthcare. And the Saskatchewan Urban Municipalities Association, or SUMA, represents members from more than 400 communities across the province. And Randy Golden is the president.
We represent over 80% of the population live in urban municipalities, and what we've been hearing is some of the things that we're seeing in the provincial budget, and the increase that we've seen now in the municipal revenue sharing is very welcome, and we acknowledge that we're very pleased with that, because that's a $21 million increase, and it's essential that our municipalities have that sort of funding because of the economic uncertainty that's happening in our world right now and in our municipalities, to continue providing the services and the programs that our residents of our communities and the province expect. The revenue sharing is absolutely essential. We do have, a couple of things that we saw that might be concerning, and we will continue to work with our provincial government. And that's around some things that did not see increases. So Saskatchewan Assessment Management Agency, for instance, did not receive an increase. We saw the transit for people with disabilities did not receive. We saw the airports funding that comes from provincial government did not receive additional funding. So when that happens, when you don't see those increases, that of course with inflation means that someone has to pick up the change in that, and that's our municipalities. So we do have concerns with that, because all of the things that I just listed will be increasing in cost, and we know that the municipalities will have to come up with those increases. We know that we need infrastructure. The infrastructure deficit is only continuing to grow. Our municipalities cannot come out of a budget or go into the budget with a deficit, which is unlike other orders of government, because we're seeing that. We can't do that. So in order to continue with maintaining our infrastructure and then replacing, we need funding. So we are very much looking forward to what our provincial government will do with with us as partners, because we have to contribute to maintain that infrastructure that so much is needed in our province. We're setting our budgets now, and we don't know what's going to happen in 2 weeks, 2 days, 2 months' time. So we need to have some type of certainty, and we would certainly hope that our province will be a partner in that. But we are also concerned with where we might be going with people that are living in our communities that aren't housed, and where we are going with mental health and addictions, because we're seeing that as a concern. And that's a concern for all of us, because those are citizens of our municipalities, but they're citizens of our province. So we want to continue to work with our provincial government to make sure that no one's left behind.
Randy Golden is the president of the Saskatchewan Urban Municipalities Association, or SUMA. The budget is forecasting a shoestring surplus for the province, like about $12 million. It's also pushing the Saskatchewan government to a $38 billion debt. 10% more than last year. So what does that mean for taxpayers? Gage Haubrich is the Prairie Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation.
The most important number for taxpayers in this budget is the $2.4 billion more that's being added to the debt by the government in this budget. It's going to cost more to taxpayers, right, when we see all those interest payments that's going to be on that debt. So this surplus number is not going to decrease the debt. It's simply hiding behind the real number, which is that $2.4 billion increase in the debt over last year. It's irresponsible borrowing, right? We're going to a time of really hard economic uncertainty and headwinds. A lot of things could happen in the next year, and the government decided, instead of saving some money to prepare for that problem, they decided to borrow irresponsibly billions more dollars and put that onto the backs of taxpayers, right? And we're looking at almost $1 billion in interest payments on that debt this year, $705 per Saskatchewanian. Saskatchewanians are cutting back, saving things for things that could be in the future. The government is continuing just to spend and put that onto the backs of taxpayers, right? Because if the tariffs hit Saskatchewan hard, the budget says they could lose about $1.4 billion in revenue. That wipes out that surplus and adds millions of dollars more in loans that taxpayers are ultimately going to have to pay for. A more responsible budget would have seen the government get the debt start going down, not adding billions of dollars to it, with potential for billions of more to be added if this tariff situation gets worse. The government should have cut spending, but unfortunately in this government, in this budget, they didn't find anywhere to cut spending. Out of 11 out of 12 of the main areas the government spends money on, they're increasing the amount of spending in this budget. They were already spending at all-time highs before that, but with all the potential economic uncertainty, it should be time to cut spending to save taxpayers money on that debt and debt interest payments. The government should be always as honest as it can with taxpayers. If you walk up today and say, oh, we've got this $12 million, but if that can disappear tomorrow, that's not real, and taxpayers should be looking at what the actual most likely scenario is. There's a problem with this government where every time they stand up and they put up a budget, they say it's not going to be this bad. We get to the mid-year, it gets much worse. The government would be much better served to taxpayers to be upfront about what they're making them pay every year and how much they're adding to the debt.
Gage Haubrich, he's the Prairie Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. We are taking your thoughts today as well. We have an email from Ellen. It says, hey, Blue Sky, I think we should be teaching standard first aid in high schools. This could save us by training people how to care for minor injuries themselves instead of relying on our healthcare system. The education budget and healthcare budget are coming from the same provincial responsibilities. She goes on to list some points for standard first aid training for students. Some summer jobs require it. It helps kids learn how to react in a calm way. Having exposure to hands-on healthcare in school might encourage them to pursue careers in nursing, medicine, or emergency services. It also helps them think about injuries and know how to treat them and help in risk management for teens. She says it would be a small thing that could be done to prevent minor injuries such as cuts and minor burns if they can be treated from home instead of ending up in the ER, which is busy enough. She says it makes for better outcomes and more comfortable drive to get to the hospital to have some basic first aid knowledge. A broken bone immobilized in a splint first or treating a bleeding injury promptly always makes for a better outcome. Just an idea to reduce provincial spending. That comes to us from Ellen. It is an interesting conversation. I think there's a lot of people who still need to figure out what this dollars and cents means for them, whether it comes to when you do your income taxes and you figure out the things that are refundable. But if you do have thoughts on the provincial budget, we would love to hear from you. You can send us an email, bluesky@cbc.ca, or call Talkback, 1-800-661-7540.